Danielle, that was beautiful. Let's thank her. Well, I think if Steve was standing here and his spirit is with us, he would smile and say thanks for coming. So welcome on behalf of the Cameron and Braga family to the celebration of life service for Steve Cameron. Stephen Douglas Cameron was born on April 27, 1961 in Portland, Oregon. He is the son of Frank and Judy Cameron, brother to Scott Cameron, and grandson of the late Mildred and Roy Stevens. He is survived by his wife Diane, son-in-law to Delinda Braga and the late Melvin Braga, brother-in-law to Larry, Allison, David, and Marcel Braga, Uncle Stevie to Grace, James, Danielle, and Lauren. Steve's parents moved from Oregon to the East Bay when he was 4 years old. Steve and his family saw Danville grow up around them as they lived in the infamous ranch at the Lawrence Road turn. That ranch hosted many parties. Some, of course, were parties that Frank and Judy didn't know about. Steve grew up riding pigs and tractors, painting the family's rental homes, and farmed walnuts. Whatever his parents embraced, Steve was right there to get into the next big project with him. The family worked hard, but fishing, camping, and water skiing was usually on the weekend agenda. Steve's music lessons began in second grade, ranging from piano, voice, and guitar. Thank God he took up the drums. Steve took on a multitude of sports and activities, from Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts to judo, soccer, Little League, basketball, tennis, and swimming. Steve began his music career at the young age of 14, playing drums and vocals at high school proms with the band White Satin. I don't need to say anything else. Not even old enough to drive, Steve relied on his mom to get him to the gigs. And for another 37 years, Steve continued to play in a number of bands, including Mojo, Dave Martin's House Party, the Aqua Velvets, the fabulous Cruise Tones, Six String, No Drama, the Stephanie Teal Band, the Steve Nakano Band, and those guys. And he recorded with the likes of Grammy Award winner Body Rate. In the summer of 1982, Steve Crash Cameron, as he was often referred to, was on tour throughout Italy with Italian pop artist Patti Pravo. Steve's last performance was on September 14th, 2013, with Six String at the infamous End of Summer Bash party that Steve and Diane hosted. Steve was instrumental in creating communities. When Steve purchased his first home at the age of 25, he immediately got involved with the Homeowners Association. He continued to be actively involved with HOAs and was most proud of his recent post as president of Tassajara Lane. This was a community that both Steve and Diane were instrumental in creating a neighborhood family. Diane is keen on ensuring that this sense of community continues in Steve's honor. Steve had a proven sales career with Paychex since 1998. Steve's biggest joy was to develop and mentor his sales teams. In his most recent role as district sales manager, he was proud of his teams in San Jose, Watsonville, San Ramon, and Fresno. He was known for always being a sharp dresser, in a suit and tie, and of course, with every hair in place. Steve met his wife, Diane, as they were both working in what they loved to do. He was a drummer, always getting the girl, and she was the event planner. As I told Diane the other day, Steve loved getting butts on the dance floor, and Diane liked getting butts to the events. But that was October of 2007 when Diane first laid eyes on Steve setting up his drum kit. A little later, Diane spotted Steve in the green room, now with his suit on. And that's when Diane blurted out, "Wow, you clean up nice." That was the start of a beautiful relationship. Diane and Steve dated for 3 years before they were engaged, August of 2010. That same day, they put in an offer on a piece of property and started building their dream home in Danville. They were married on October 9th, 2010. They moved into their home on December 23rd, and in typical Steve and Diane fashion, they pulled together their house in 2 days so the Cameron and Braga families could come together and start a tradition of holidays. Diane and Steve lived a very full life during their 3-year courtship, followed by their 3.5 years of marriage. From traveling around the world, attending music events, hosting incredible parties, and even making their own wine, they did more in their 6.5 years together than many people do in a lifetime. No matter who Steve met, he always made an impact on people. Look at the people in this room. Whether it's Umberto at the car wash or Charlie from the barber shop, he treated everyone with respect, and he made them feel good. That's why so many of you are here today, to remember Steve. Steve loved God. Steve loved people. And he loved life. And he will be deeply missed. I'd like to invite my wife to the platform. I have a few comments about Steve. Steve had a great sense of humor, and he loved jokes. I remember occasionally in a band, sometimes you have to do a free gig. That just comes with it. And when we did a free gig, Steve would always eventually say to me during the gig, "You're the best guitar player I've ever played with in this price range." And I would remind him the difference between a drummer and a mutual fund. Because the mutual fund eventually matures and earns an income. Yeah, and when Spencer, we had a little 3-piece thing we did together, and Spencer and I have some Asian in us, and Steve obviously is not. And we were trying to come up with these clever names, and we came up with the name Those Guys, and those guys stuck, and so every time we introduced Steve Cameron, we would say, "Steve Cameron, the other white meat." Steve had a lot of fantastic qualities. One quality in particular was that Steve was a deep man of compassion for others. He was a giver. He was always aware of the people around him, and I know in his heart he always wondered how he could encourage someone or make their situation better. That's just the way the guy rolled. He didn't judge people. That was not Steve. He turned a blind eye to the common prejudices of this world and took the time to get to know people's hearts and appreciate them for who they were and who they are. He sincerely cared about people and took the time to get to know them. Our friendship had a lot of different dimensions, Steve and I. We were obviously both musicians, but the one that meant the most to both of us was our common faith in God. You see, Steve was a Christ follower, and our friendship pointed each other to God. I don't say Christian because that label confuses people, and it's really not a term that's used in the Bible. It's just kind of a man-made label, but Steve was a Christ follower, and his life took on the characteristics of the Christ he followed. And it allowed our friendship to go to deeper levels than most acquaintances do. Steve and I talked about the hard things in life, as friends should. We were with each other in the foxholes of life and in the trenches. And we also were able to enjoy the mountaintop experiences. We were vulnerable with each other. We were transparent with each other. There was no image management going on between Steve and I. We could call each other whatever the condition of our heart and be each other's best friend. And as you realize, those kinds of friendships are hard to develop in life. So there's a deep appreciation in my heart or my friend. But the happiest, the most excited I've ever seen Steve Cameron, besides when he's drumming with a lot of people in the room, when he met this lovely lady, Diane. And so I asked my wife to come up and share a few thoughts and her memories about Steve.
We would have dinner together, and we'd hear about Diane. And we're like, who's Diane? I wanted to share with you a story. One of my favorite stories of Stevie was when the four of us went out and we spent the day together. Steve was so excited to introduce us to Diane. We'd heard so much about her and really only had a glimpse of her from a distance. So the two of them planned a day trip to Napa for the four of us. Well, you probably all know in this room it was really Diane that planned the trip. A beautiful Napa Valley day with a treasured friend and the new love of his life. The day was perfect. Steve was beaming with happiness as we stopped for the prepared picnic lunch overlooking the pool in Napa Valley at Signore's Valley Winery, then to Oxbow Market for cheese, Vintners Collective for wine tasting, and stopping for takeout calamari on the way home. I had to mention all these details because Steve was so proud of Diane, for she had perfectly designed that day for the four of us. This was one of the many things that he loved about her, a day full of treasured memories as we had watched the start of Steve and Diane's love for one another and the start of a newfound friendship. He loved you dearly.
Well, I know many of us in this room have memories of Steve. Steve was my best friend. And my heart finds great comfort in knowing where he is and knowing that I will be with him where he is. And there's no regrets. In fact, in his last days, I was able to visit him. And I asked Steve, are you at peace? He says, yeah, I'm at peace. I said, Steve, do you have any regrets? He goes, no, I have no regrets. So the family has asked a few people to come up and share their memories of Steve. And I would like to invite to the platform Steve's friend, Dave Martin.
So did anybody see the Academy Awards on Sunday? I'm sure you did. Okay. Well, I was watching that, and it sort of felt like something was forgotten. Some category, something didn't get televised on that program. Well, in fact, it was actually announced today that the Film Academy had regretfully forgot to give out an award. So I'm pretty excited because through the magic of the New Life Church and, of course, the internet, maybe Facebook, we are going to actually have a live feed today directly to heaven, directly to Hollywood, directly to the entire galaxy. And I'm going to need, well, actually, it would be very nice and it would be great for Steve because he did enjoy applause. If we could give acknowledgement to this award that I think is going to be coming on live in about 5 seconds, something like that. Wait, I think we're on. So you guys are ready, I hope. Okay, here we go. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are live. For the most incredible style and grace exemplified in a human being in the known universe, the Oscar goes to Steve Cameron. Come on. How about that? Steve Cameron. Okay. All right, thank you so much. Obviously, Steve was probably proof that aliens are living among us. And of course, his hair was perfect, as mentioned by John. I remember meeting Steve about 1981, playing with a fantastic band called Mojo. And I think that Miles and Michael, maybe Mick, are here today. I was going, who is this guy? I mean, he plays like an amazing guy. It was like the Stuart Copeland from The Police or something. And he looked like a GQ model. And he was so white. I mean, one of Steve's signature songs to sing behind the drum kit when he was playing in the cover bands was "Play That Funky Music, White Boy." I mean, duh. I mean, it was like Department of Redundancy Department. I admired Steve and liked him so much, as obviously we all did. And Frank and Judy, who were his parents here, I know we all want to thank you for the wonderful spirit that you brought into this world and that you nurtured here on earth. And you obviously did a great job. Now, I don't believe anyone that I've ever known balanced a life so efficiently and creatively and successfully as Steve. You know, beyond the obviously incredibly good looks and the aforementioned blonde hair, he was intelligent. He was a brilliant business administrator. He was amazingly gifted as an artist and a creative soul. He was a wonderful singer, wonderful drummer, wonderful musician. As John mentioned, terrific sense of humor. In fact, actually, I'm with you on that. There was nothing more fun than either laughing with Steve or making Steve laugh. I mean, he had this very distinctive laugh that was just like this sort of Tommy gun guttural thing. And if you really got him, he'd have this little squeal, high-pitched feel right at the end. Like, something at the end. I'm sure you remember that. He was a very honest and truly good person. And everything he did, he strove to be the best, but it was never about being better than anyone else. It was being the best he could be and about being better than he used to be and always trying to refine and always trying to improve. Plus, he had an impeccable taste in just about everything. And, of course, to find Diane and for her to find him. And as sort of a side note that's really significant, because we all know Steve was a truly remarkable person, spirit. But our friend Jerry G and I were talking last night, and Jerry said, Steve was incredibly special, but he always made you feel special in his presence. That's pretty remarkable. Judy and Frank and I were talking the other night, and we sort of made the observation that Steve had about sort of a four-leaf clover in his life in terms of divisions, sort of four divisions, but like four leaves. And all of us here experienced it in one form or another. He had his church and faith. And that was a very important side of Steve's life. He had his business executive, district manager, paychecks, day job persona guy with that always perfect suit that you mentioned. There was, of course, the dark side, the music side, and he could hang with all of these different, they're very different areas. But then, of course, there was also the fourth leaf in his life, which was the private side, which was his love, his family, wife and partner Diane, his close friends. And it was very rare if any of us could really travel all those 4 leaves. But very few people, if you're old enough to remember, like Ed Sullivan with the guy with the plates, going, da, 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 da. I mean, nobody could do that. And I will always be in awe how he could just easily flow through all those areas and be so organized and be able to treat everybody, as you mentioned, with amazing aplomb. So, all of us, whether we have an incredible amount of faith or we're still searching or whatever, I think a lot of us are trying to still make sense of this a little bit. It's hard because we're human and we don't want him gone. Couple of positives that may have come out of this that may help a little bit. Judy shared with me the other night that in the last, fall months, when Diane was working, they needed to be there to spend time with Steve. And so inevitably, they got to spend hours and hours and talking, reminiscing, laughing. But how often do parents get to spend time at that point of their life with their child? They were there from the beginning and the end. 52 years and, 10 months? Something like that. But the time that Judy and Frank and Steve got to spend together, many of us would never experience with our family in 300 or 500 years. It's an amazing blessing for them. And and for Steve, obviously. That's a pretty remarkable thing. Being a guy that's sort of ADD and needs deadlines to be efficient, another reason why I appreciated Steve so much is that Diane and Steve, when he got diagnosed in 2012, being the type of people that they were going to fight tooth and nail, with their belief system, with their faith, with their guns and with their hands, whatever it took, they were going to try and beat this thing. And they ended up making a commitment to live life to the fullest with the time that they had. And Diane, as all of us, you and Steve were just a shining inspiration to us all, how you handled this. Because handling a serious health issue and the challenging just of dealing with terrible news and saying, what are we going to do? How are we going to make this a positive? How are we going to do it? And they chose to live their life as much as they could with the time that they had to the fullest. If there was a place they wanted to go, they went. If there was something they wanted to have in their lives, or if they wanted to spend times with friends, they did that. We can all learn from that, not to put things off. Just remarkable. And so I mentioned they traveled, they shared spontaneous joy and time with friends and family, and they definitely checked off a number of the bucket list items. They also, it's hard to imagine, if they were married in October of 2010, they basically had about 12 months married before the incident happened and that tumor was diagnosed, if I'm not mistaken. So, and it feels like you guys knew each other for generations, and you probably did. Wayne Dyer is sort of a inspirational guy that's out there, and he quotes Leonardo da Vinci as saying, people of accomplishment rarely sat back and let things happen to them. They went out and happened to things. So that's a quote from Leonardo da Vinci. People of accomplishment rarely sat back and let things happen to them. They went out and happened to things. Steve is certainly an example of that, as are you. Another quote recently that seemed very interesting to me as I sort of wrap this up. Bill Murray, of all people, he's a comedian, actor, very flippant. Usually, you might know him from Caddyshack or Saturday Night Live. You don't think of him as this sage person of advice. He was recently on Charlie Rose the other night, and he lives in South Carolina now. He doesn't have an agent. He got rid of all the Hollywood trappings, and he lives his life, and his career has been fantastic. And he went to a gospel church in Charleston, and Charlie Rose was asking about, what has changed for you? How do you look at each day? And he said, well, I just went recently to this incredible gospel service. There was a substitute preacher, and the preacher had suggested, what if we wake up and we say, Lord, what do you want me to do today? What do you want me to do? And this really moved Bill Murray. It sort of rocked my world. It was a very simple, very simple thing. But there's a big difference when you wake up and you just sort of go, oh gosh, I got to do this, I got to do that. And I've tried to do that, maybe, but for all of us. So whether you have faith, whether you have spiritual leanings, or maybe you're from the show me state, whether you have a living loved one. I was talking to somebody the other night that literally, in a marriage, one spouse would wake up and say, what can I do for your dear today? And, so if you have a living loved one who has your best intentions in mind, maybe you have somebody from the past that is not here, whether it's a mother, it's a father, someone you love, friend, maybe even our good friend Steve, who we all respected and loved so much, his talents, abilities, and attributes. That could be a wonderful inspiration for when you ask that question, what can I do for you today? There's a great preacher, Douglas Fitch, used to be at Glide. Used to end all his sermons with something you've probably all heard before, and that's work like you don't need the money, love like you've never been hurt, dance the dance of life like no one is watching. So Steve is definitely a reminder for us all to cherish every day, tell people you love them, and continue to make this world a much better place in any way, whether it's a small act of kindness. So when you leave this world, it's going to be a better place than when you entered it. Thank you, Steve. Thank you for this time.
That's awesome. Thank you. I'd like to welcome to the platform Ted Hassey, worked with Steve at Paychecks.
Good morning. I'm not an artist, so I probably don't know how to move this like all the band people. I probably don't need this anyway, everyone who knows me. So, gosh, I'm here to represent Paychecks Incorporated. We're a 15,000 employee company, but I think what's great, we're like this small, big company. From our CEO to our officers to a lot of his teammates, we just loved Steve. Over the last 2 years, there's just been always an outpouring of interest on how he was doing. I get to represent Paychecks probably because I hired Steve. I remember him walking into my office, nice hair, of course. Now, for once, I will tell you, he was slightly disheveled because he worked at a very relaxed professional place at the time, and we were always very, East Coast. Look at me. I have probably too blue of a shirt. But we finally he talked, he's like, hey, I normally, I understand I need to wear a suit, but they would kind of know that I'm interviewing, and so I was like, okay, fine, just come here, and I put him through his everyone knows from Paychex, probably 800 interviews too long. But he was absolutely a class act, and from that day in 1997 to when he actually accepted our job offer that probably paid him $40,000 less than what he was doing, and he said, I believe it, let's try it. It was a great thing. Steve did great in everything he did. He had a great track record, but he had never, it seemed like, found a day job. I've heard about all of his other jobs now, right? We have his band gigs. He was president of the Homeowners Association. Now I understand why he became president of the Homeowners Association, because you can't find yourself should you have a party that's too loud. Right? So I got it. So we're going to talk about his AKA the day job, which he did great. And I other than 2 years, this was really remarkable for sales, I think. From 1998 until really him passing away on Friday, he and I had worked together for every year except for 2 of them. He either was a sales rep for me or a district sales manager. He did just a great job. We knew, by the way, that Diane was special. In times of stress, instead of easing up on people, I might be one of those people who might grind even more. So some of our sales meetings with the managers might go a little long. And I knew that Diane was really special because usually we'd then go out to dinner at the end of it, and everyone drive home the next day and fly out, and he'd be like right out the door. I was like, I got it now. Someone special. So that's how we always knew just where everything was. But he was such a talented individual. He was a great friend. It doesn't shock you all. He was so humane. He had such a great way about himself that he would be an excellent salesperson. He was an artist at night. He was an artist during the day. He had the sales profession. He helped people save for retirement. He was always out there helping sell HR consulting. You look back and you just look at everything that he ever touched was about someone else. He did a great job for us. I think what's really amazing is probably from 1999, one of our great sales teams, virtually all the reps came today. Even one who found out just about Steve's passing, dropped everything and came here. It's just a testament for the relationships that you make. I think people are really missing out on something if they don't give something to the people they work with, because you spend so much time with them. And if Steve hadn't let us into his life, we wouldn't have known what he was like. And he was always a really silent witness about his faith. He and I both are Christ believers. He would always be able to tell if someone was a believer, but he always modeled the way like, frankly, Jesus would have. He was not perfect, but he would always model the way, and you just wanted to be better. So you could always tell that there was something special about Steve, and it came out with everyone that he touched. And as you can tell, whether it was professionally, in the evening or in the day or at church, he just modeled just a great way. When I think of Steve, and I talked to several people, first thing that comes to mind is always integrity, his passion. And he had a low-key, burning passion. He wasn't necessarily always the rah-rah guy. He was that cool drummer back there, but he was the great support system. For some of my sales teams, they used to call him the favorite because I was hard on everyone else but him. But he was really the buffer because he could somehow take whatever I was doing or my intensity and get it out. But he always wanted to have perfection. And I think that was great. How do you have perfection, and then you also are you're just fallible, and you still have you're not perfect. He was loving. What great poise he had. You see every one of those pictures, which were great. Just what a poised, handsome individual. He was intelligent. Of course, he's a snappy dresser. You think you have to come up here and you have to talk. And if you look at any of the pictures I'm in, I'm probably more casual than he is. So, I'm worrying about, like, my tie today. Do I look good? Sherry's like, please just get out of here. Can we get out of the hotel room because I'm sick of this? I was like, I've lost enough weight? What would Steve approve now? Would Steve love me whether I was 300 or 250 pounds? Let's be honest. He took you where you were. If you knew Steve Cameron, you had a friend, right? He was a top rep. He was a top district sales manager. I just talked to a person who reports to me 15 years later from when Steve ran a rookie call for him. He still remembers how Steve always gave more of himself. He wanted to do well. He wanted to make great money. He wanted to never compromise his integrity, but he always helped everyone else. if I could just talk maybe a couple personal things out of Paychecks. Paychecks brought he and I together, but he was just such a great friend. My wife and I, Sherry, had him in our wedding. He was a groomsman. He sang in our wedding. If we hadn't gotten married pre-digital age, we probably would have sent in a few photos. We have so many things that we did that were great. As we've all talked about his integrity and how hard he worked and how driven he was, I also recall the time I gave him a call. I'm sitting in my office in the East Bay saying, AT&T Park, someone just gave us some seats. Steve, you want to go to a Giants game? Can you cancel all your appointments? He's like, yep, let's go. You know, I remember one cool thing. I love music. My brother's a musician. He and I always loved talking. I mean, everyone had that commonality. Music, what a great thing to bring people together. But how many of you can say you went and saw Rush twice with Steve? You get to go, and the best is I'm like, what Neil Peart's doing is really cool, right? And he's like, oh, yeah. Of course, I'm screaming because he has his little earpieces on, and I can't talk. I'm yelling like this for the next 5 days. But we saw them 10 years apart. It's just those memories with Steve are great. I saw all those great photos, Diane, of your travels. And I have to tell you, it gets a little jealous, all those travels. But we wanted to share with you, because of Steve's excellence, how many different award trips he got to go on. And I think a lot of us were lucky enough to go on them with you. So it's not a competition. But I've been to Palm Springs, Orlando, Scottsdale. I spent 9/11. Sherry and I spent 9/11 with him in a cooking class. We went to the Maui, Grand Wailea, Atlantis, the Bahamas, San Diego, Napa, Lake Tahoe, Reno, Las Vegas, Fresno. And I've been with him to Rochester, New York. Hard to beat. But through all those trips and all that time and countless sales meetings and just trips, and we always had close-knit groups, you got to really talk to Steve. And I think the best part of Steve is you just hang out. Whether it was in a spa, whether it was just out there with a glass of wine. We shared many great, fabulous glasses of wine. I think my first wine club was BV with him in like 1998 when we went up on a little excursion, and you know, he gave me a bottle of 1970 vintage for my 40th birthday. I still just don't know when to drink it because it's like 40-something years old. But he wanted to get me something that was great. And those are just cherished memories. We have so many people that have reached out that wanted to come and spend some time with you all today. I have no reason why, you know, the good die young, to just think of Billy Joel seems like some, you know, song that comes to mind, but Steve was just all class. We loved him. All the Paychecks individuals, if we could have brought the 15,000, they would have come. They really loved him. We cherished him. Every one of of my former bosses, his bosses, there's just nothing you can ever say bad about Steve, but he gave so much. We just are so appreciative that he was a part of our family. We just pray for you all, and we know he's in a better place. Michael Majors and I and Sherry spent last Thursday with him, and we started going through stories, and we were feeling like maybe we should leave, and he wanted more. And he was just so happy, and we had just such great memories. Far too many to just talk about in 3 minutes. But we just cherished him. And I think the biggest thing is that he kept his faith the whole time. You know, everyone can talk about and say, I'd rather have quality than quantity. I have faith, but you only really know what it's going to be like is when you're on your deathbed and you're going to have one person that you're going to be committed to. And he was committed to Jesus. You know, I also, you know, we just talked, and it just never wavered. And that's why, instead of with tears, I can just smile and laugh, because that's how he would have liked it. And he's looking down on us, but he is in a place with no pain. It is shimmering gold. It is whatever perfection is. And let's be honest, he fits right in there. So God bless you all, and thank you so much.
I'd like to welcome to the platform Denise DeHart, friend of the family.
I'm lucky enough to be lucky to be in a tight circle of Diane's friends, known as the Chickies, the Posse, or the Angels, depending on who you are. Each has known Diane for 30 years or more, so you can imagine what this tight group of friends can be like when a new man enters the scene. We're not an easy group. Steve really took his time getting to know Diane. It was 6 months or more before they actually referred to themselves as dating, and then even another 6 months before the first kiss. Like, what guy does that? I remember saying to Diane, "Are you sure about this guy? I mean, he's nice and all, and he's really cute. He seems like a stand-up guy, and okay, he is a drummer. But are you really, really sure?" I will never forget. She turned to me and said, "You know, Denise, there's something about this one. I'm going to stick it out and see what happens." What happened over the next 6.5 years was beautiful. Before we knew it, they bought a lot, they built a castle, and then they exchanged vows in a vineyard. It was the most amazing day for all of us. They celebrated the happiness they both had been in search for, the happiness they both so deserved. And from that day forward, they celebrated in a larger-than-life kind of way. Steve and Diane lived their short life together to its fullest, more than most do in a lifetime. Their shared passion for food and music took them to Paris for cocktails with Sting, to a backyard barbecue with Keith Urban, and of course to the musical land of New Orleans, where Steve quickly fell in love with the people and culture, and even enjoyed an occasional game of drag queen bingo. They attended the Kentucky Derby, the Grand Prix in Montreal, had dinner at the Bracebridge at the Ahwahnee Hotel in Yosemite, and special parties at Castello di Amorosa, where Diane talked Steve into dressing up in tights as the king and to put a hat on that beautiful head of hair of his. But actually, I don't think Diane ever had to talk Steve into anything. He was happy to do it. He loved her, and he loved to see her smile. Their wine and travel interests took them around the world, to places like Italy for tastings and cooking lessons, and then to their own backyard where they had their first harvest party last fall at Cameron and Cameron Vineyards. They had a profound effect on each other and on the others as a couple. Thank you, Steve, for taking us girls in, not just as Diane's girlfriends, but as her sisters. Many times your space was invaded, and bless you, you welcomed each of us, brought out the glasses, poured the wine, and let us chat into the late hours, sometimes waking up to more than one woman in the house. Thank you for sharing with all of us the beautiful corners of your life. And thank you most of all, Steve, for giving Diane your incredible gift of love and sharing with her your love for life. You were the man of her dreams. You completed her. And Diane, you're an amazing woman. You are my very best friend. There couldn't have been a more perfect person to be with Steve these last 6.5 years. What you gave him was magic. He left us too soon, but he left a lucky man. He made a fine song, he married a fine woman, and he made a fine wine. Steve Cameron, you will forever be missed, but never forgotten. Thank you.
I'd like to invite to the platform Steve's father, Frank Cameron.
Like I said, I'm the father of the bride that we have enjoyed a life with Steve so many years, and until the other night when we went up to get all these pictures out of the attic, which forced us to dig into all those boxes and find these pictures, we enjoyed ourselves tremendously just reliving the life that we had with him from the time he was born. But I have to do something here. I'm going to take a picture of this audience, okay? The ones here that I'm taking the picture of first are a lot of his friends, and the ones over here are all the musicians. Crap, he had a lot of people. I wrote out something to talk to you about today, and of course, the people before me just stole all my thunder. And, but Judy and I, together now married 54 years and going, had two great sons, Steve, firstborn. And in the Bible it talks about, Jesus says, a day in heaven is worth 1,000 years on earth, and 1,000 years on earth is a day in heaven. It's his timetable. We don't understand that timetable. We're too finite. And yet, God chose the time that he was born, where he was born, who he was born to, and we really lucked out on that blessing. From the time he was just a little guy, we lived in about a 600 square foot house out of the Navy. Judy's 7 months pregnant, so the government ain't going to take care of that one. And we rented a little house, and Stephen was born, and he had a little crib in the corner of our bedroom, which was probably about 8 by 8. And we'd look down at the foot of the bed where his crib is, and he'd be sitting up with this big smile on his face. How can you get along with a kid looking at you with a smile on his face every morning? But he was quite a young man. We did a lot of things together. We did a lot of camping in the back of a pickup truck in the Sierras. We fished. We had a golden retriever that wouldn't stay out of the water. And that carried on through his life. I remember one time we were fishing at Beardsley Reservoir, and Steve said, he was about 16, 17. He said, can I take the boat out? And we were with a whole bunch of people fishing. And I said, sure. So he takes this 12-foot aluminum boat with too big of a motor on the back, and he went out and didn't pay any attention. He must have hit the throttle. The boat came up and turned over. And he's in the water with his boots on. And there's nobody out there that was willing to help him, even though there were other boats. The boat's upside down. Steve's drifting toward the dam head. He swam with the boat all the way to the shore. And of course, he didn't want to tell his dad. I was so thankful he was still alive, for gosh sakes. But the swimming lessons worked. And I'll say that one of the important things that we chose to do during the life of our children when they were young is I worked a job or two, or sometimes 3, to make sure that Mom was home with those children, and she did a hell of a job. Skipping fast forward here to the time that he came out to our house and they announced that he and Diane were going to be married. And Judy says, gosh, where's it going to be? And Diane says, in your backyard. We live on an acre. We have a vineyard. And that was something that she thought pretty special. And that marriage happened, and it was just a grand, grand event. And we are so blessed to have Diane in our family and her brothers and the whole family. They're special people in our lives. And we thank you, especially all of you, to come here today. I know there's the musician group that's over here. And then we have we live in Tracy now. We have neighbors from Tracy. Good neighbors and friends have come all the way in here. And also we have the Danville Dukes represented here, which is a street rod club that I belonged to for many years. And we ran around Danville in hot rods and had a great time for quite a while. The Danville Dukes are here. I thank them. Charlie the barber, outstanding guy. Don't go anywhere else. He's just full of fun and a jokester, and I'd bring in Steve in the wheelchair, and we'd get him stood up and get him into the barber, and he would just sit there and talk to Steve and trim that hair down to 0 like Steve wanted it, and we had a great time. And Charlie, thanks for coming today. And so many friends here. God, I didn't even see the balcony over here. No, that's the other third section. Appreciate you coming. Thank God Steve is where he's at. Thank God his misery is over with. And we thank God that we had him in our family.
I'd like to invite to the platform Larry Braga, Diane's brother.
Well, Steve, you filled the whole place up again. Look at that. I mean, look at all these people. Congratulations. Like you said, my name's Larry Braga. Diane is my sister, and Steve is my brother-in-law. And today I'd like to actually kind of harp on Cindy, who gave me a big glass of water before coming up here. Now I have to go to the bathroom, so this is going to be really quick. I'll try to hold it. You know, I'm kind of one of the latecomers. I mean, I've known Steve for less than 4 years, and probably one of the best people I've ever met in my entire life. Became extremely close to him over the last 4 years. 2 of those years were, you know, he was not sick, and the last 2 years he was, you know, diagnosed with his brain tumor. You know, the prognosis on a cancer like that is 14 months. Steve lived 24 months. And that's really because of all the people in this room, all the support that you guys have all provided, the love, the dedication, the help, the physical help. My mom, of course, helped out Steve and Diane and the Camerons until his last days. She was there every week to help my sister out and the Camerons out to help get him breakfast, lunch, dinner, to carry him upstairs. It was quite a beautiful sight to see that. I unfortunately live down in San Diego, and I wasn't able to help out as much as I can, but I certainly enjoyed all the different events that you know, Steve and Diane sponsored over the last couple of years. It was absolutely beautiful. I'm thinking about taking up the drums now. Is that a little bit late? Because, you know, I tell you, the guy had a great life. One of the difficult things I need to do is really speak for my sister. And, you know, I don't blame her for not being able to come up here, but she did want me to express a few of her thoughts to you guys, which I'm going to, you know, find difficult to do. So put away those tissues, hide them somewhere, because you're not going to use them, okay? So anyways, here goes. I'm going to be reading this, so bear with me. These are Diane's words. It took a while for Diane to find the love of her life, someone that gave as much as she did, cared as much as she did, laughed as much as she did, and then along came Steve Cameron. Steve and Diane spent 3 years building their relationship, and then in a matter of 4 months, they got engaged. Started building a house, got married, and moved into a home they created together. Just 1.5 years into their marriage, Steve was diagnosed with glioblastoma multiforme. It's a terminal brain cancer. The night he was diagnosed, Steve and Diane sat up in the Love Shack and discussed his wants and desires as they faced the challenges ahead. They kept traveling. This did not stop them from doing the things they needed to do.
there were even more parties. Steve was playing even more music. There were a lot of doctor appointments added to their busy lifestyle and schedule. Visits to UCSF for second opinions, visits to Stanford for third opinions, trips to St. George, Utah to learn about holistic medication treatments. There was even a special trip to Southern California for Diane to pick up Steve's dream car, which you guys have seen outside, what an awesome vehicle. It's a joy just to even start up and listen to the motor. They fondly referred to Steve's car as the cancer car. For Steve's first round of radiation, he was able to drive. I mean, I actually traveled with, it was amazing, like, why can't I drive this car and take Steve to his appointments? He was actually driving himself to his own radiation appointments in this Aston Martin. I'm like, wow, this is incredible. On his second round of radiation, which started in October, unfortunately, he was no longer able to drive. Unfortunately, others had to come in and provide for him. During this time, Diane had an incredible support system. That people stepped up to the plate and actually helped Steve and Diane out tremendously. Friends, family, church members, and neighbors were delivering meals, providing rides to doctor's appointments, walking the dog Stella, sitting with Steve during his chemo trips, and praying with him, which was very important to Steve. Both Steve and Diane firmly believed that he out-survived the original prognosis, as I said, of 14 months. He was with us for 24. God's miracle. And this is all due, again, to his positive energy that he received from others and from family. There are so many people that Diane would actually love to thank for being here. All of you are in this room, and you guys know who you are. For those who actually, came in the middle of the night and to support Diane in times of really, really very low times, people were there to support her. Diane loved Steve, obviously, and she knew, and even if she knew that their time together was going to be short, she'd wait for him, marry him, and go through the process and experience all over again. He was her everything. There are lots of love stories. This is the one that Diane will cherish forever. And there's no end to this. I mean, so I would just like to say, just like I said, having known him for just a short time, and I probably had one of the greatest Christmases I've ever had in my entire life this last year in December of 2013. Got to spend time with the Camerons, and basically we kind of all knew at that point that this was kind of it, and it was quite an experience to have such a family experience like we had this last Christmas. So again, I'd like to thank all the relatives, friends, family, fans, people, coworkers who have come here today to actually share in the celebration of life for Steve. We thank you all. We love you all. And I'm sorry I was the last one. Now I feel like I've got to say more, but let's just keep a piece of Steve in our hearts, in our DNA, and cherish it because he's a very special man. And thank you very much. Thanks for having me up here. Appreciate that.
I remember a moment in 2004 when Steve and I were in a recording studio and having a hard time finishing a project that we were both working on, and we started it and it just got stopped, and then Steve pinged me and said, "We got to finish this thing." I said, "Well, that would be great, but I need somebody to help. We're better together. Let's do this together." And so one night, how sometimes these things go into the evenings, into the wee hours, and we were working on a song. And he had just finished putting the drums down, and so the song is a song called Rescue. And the words say these words: you are the source of life. I can't be left behind. No one else will do. I will take hold of you. I need you, Jesus. Come to my rescue. Where else can I go? There's no other place. There's no other person in which I'm saved. So capture me with your grace, and I will follow you. And so Steve and I are sitting in the control room, and he goes, I want to sing that song. It speaks exactly to the season of life I'm in. I'm in a storm. I believe in Christ, but I want to sing this song because it expresses my heart as a prayer, as a cry out. And so he went into the recording booth, having never really gone for it before. And we were both in tears at the end of the song because we knew something special had just happened, where an artist got in touch with his creator and expressed something that captured the moment. Just like that car alarm. Is it the Aston?
Somebody better check.
It's the
That's Morse code. He said I love you.
yeah, the Morse code for I love you. Don't feel guilty if it's your car, but if you think it is your car, go take care of it. No, it's off for now. It'll come back on. But Steve recorded this song, and so I want you to listen to this song. Steve sang it, and we put some images behind it. So be encouraged as our friend Steve sings to us.
You are the source of life. I can't be left behind. No one else will do. I will take hold of you. I need you, Jesus, to come to my rescue. Where else can I go? There's no other name by which I am saved. Capture me with grace. I will follow you. I will follow you. You are the source of life. I can't be left behind. No one else I will follow you. I will follow you. This world is nothing for me. I will follow you. I will follow you. This world is nothing for me. I will follow you.
Well, for those musicians in the room, there was no auto-tune used on that vocal performance. That was just Steve singing. Well, lots of kind words spoken, and one of the things that Steve and I talked a lot about, as was mentioned by Dave, is not a lot of people know when their day comes. For some people, it happens suddenly, and there's no moments to talk about life or things that you love. It's sudden, but there's an upside to this. If you know Steve, you always like to look at the upside of things. The upside to this is that many of you were able to spend some time with him that was meaningful, and to share your heart and experience with him that was meaningful to him. And for he and I, we talked about what was temporary and what was eternal, because he knew his day was coming, and he wasn't sure when. But how can you not think about your mortality when you're fighting a disease like cancer? It just comes. And so you start thinking about what lasts and what doesn't last. And so we started putting down some thoughts just about things that don't last. What are temporary things? Well, our bodies, they're temporary. Youth and talent, it's great to have it, but it's temporary. Beautiful houses and cars are very cool. So thankful for them, and they're a lot of fun, but they're temporary. So what's eternal? Well, neither one of us felt really qualified to answer that question. At least we wanted the truth. And so we went to where we find the truth for the both of us, and that was the Bible. And we realized that the Bible had an answer. And it says that our souls, they're eternal, and so are our relationships with others. They're eternal. So that means, from our discussion, that they transfer into eternity. So everything we own is on loan. We're renters. We're not owners. When the game's over, all the pieces go back into the box. Except our souls and our relationships. So Steve and I took the discussion even further, and we realized that no one misses their appointment with death. No one's ever been able to escape that except Christ. And that no one goes to heaven by accident. You just don't lean into it and decide that that's where you're going to go. It's just, so we went on a search for the truth. How does someone secure what happens when life here ends? We went back to the Bible. And I call Steve a Christ follower. You know, even in Christ's time, they didn't like churches. People don't have a problem with churches. I mean, with Christ, they have a problem with churches. Churches can be confusing. So we've deducted that a walk with Christ is not about an institution, it's about a relationship. All right? That's why you're here. So, how does one establish a relationship with God? Well, the Bible says through Christ. I know some of us are searchers. I know some of us have different belief systems, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about Steve and his beliefs and what we discussed. So it wasn't about regular church attendance. It wasn't thinking good thoughts. How does someone get to heaven? Well, is there a scale where all of your good deeds get put on one scale and another scale? And if you find yourself, no. So what is the truth? Well, it's found through Christ. God sent his son to die for our sins. The Bible's really a love letter. It's not a book of don'ts. It's a book of do's. And so as we explored it, we realized that eternity is found through Christ. And Steve knew that. But yet, as you all articulated so well as you came up to the platform, it was not something he imposed on people. Corrie ten Boom said, preach the gospel at all times, and when necessary, use words. His life was the story. Who he was the gospel, lived out. Was he perfect? No. Neither am I, and neither are you. We're all on this journey called life. And we live it to the best we can. And we develop relationships that mean something to us. And I lost my best friend, and many of you lost your best friend, you lost your husband. But the way that we honor someone's memory is to carry it forward. So I didn't want to leave this part of the clover uncovered. I mean, covered. I want you to know where Steve found the strength to be Steve. He was a great guy, but there was more under the hood than that, just like that Aston Martin. So as we close out this time, I've done a few of these memorial services over the years, but never for someone that I love this much. And when you love someone, you want to tell them about it, but you also want others to share in the joy of who this person was to you and is to you. And so, are you thinking about your own mortality right now? I know I do. I wonder what people would say about me if they were coming up and sharing this podium, and it was my picture on the screen, not my friends. That's not morbid, that's reality. And so, the lesson that we can all take away from our friendship and relationship with Steve is, it's never too late to change. Every day can be a new day, if you want it to be. Just like Dave said, God, what do you want me to do today? How about being a different person than the guy you were yesterday? And so as we're faced with our own mortality, as we celebrate the life of Steve Cameron, I'd like to close this in prayer. I don't mean it to be awkward. I don't mean it to be weird. Prayer, according to the Bible, is a conversation with God. And that's what this whole time was. A conversation with God about someone we love. So, if you believe in the power of prayer, would you bow your heads with me as I close out this time together? Lord, I said it at dinner the other night with a group of Steve's friends, with Steve there. It's love that brings us here together today. We're all here because of love and because someone chose to love you and to love the people around him, and look what's happened. But the ripple effect continues because love never ends. Love is more important than nailing a song as a performance. It's more important than achieving a goal at work. Love is more important than getting the promotion, the raise, the job, whatever it is. Those things are cool, and we're thankful for them. But we don't want to lose sight of what's important in life, because that's what makes days like this so hard and full of regrets. And so we honor our friend Steve, the friend that you gave us, Lord, by letting our lives be different. I know that as your heads are bowed and your eyes are closed, or maybe some of you here who say, you know what, I knew there was something different about that guy. I just didn't know what it was. And you would like a relationship with Christ and receiving the forgiveness and the atonement, the hope and the joy that resided in our friend's heart. It's really simple to do. This is the prayer I prayed with Steve. If you want to receive Christ as Savior, it's just really simple. You agree with someone else here on earth. That's what the Bible says. It says, if you agree with someone else on earth, Jesus said these words, you acknowledge me as Savior on earth, I will acknowledge you to my Father in heaven. If you don't, I can't. So it's through Christ. It's just two people agreeing. So in these closing moments, I'm just going to look across the room. And if you want to receive Christ as your Savior today, I'm just going to have to look across the room and I'll agree with you. And it'll be just that simple. So I'm looking to my right, your left. And if you want to receive Christ as Savior, I'll agree with you. Yes, I agree with you. And you, and you, and you in the back, and you back there. And you, ma'am, I agree with you. And I agree with you. And you, sir, and you, sir. And you, ma'am. I'm just looking across the room. It's a simple prayer. I agree with you, sir, and you, sir. Yes. And you, sir, I agree with you. And you, ma'am, I agree with you. And you, sir, in the back. And you, ma'am. And you, sir, I agree with you. And you, ma'am, back there and against the wall. I agree with you, and I see you back there. Anyone else? I agree with you. I agree with you, sir. And I agree with you. I agree with you in the back wall. I agree with you. 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 And I agree with you. And I agree with you. And you, sir. And you, ma'am, I agree with you. Yeah. I'm getting old and I don't see as well as I used to, but I'm not the one that's important right now. I just get to be the best man at the wedding again. This is a relationship, not a religion. I agree with you in the back. My focus came back. There you are. And there you are. So let's close. Father, I think I hear Steve saying, this is awesome. And I pray, Lord, in the days to come, that we will honor his memory, that we would live life to the fullest, that we would enjoy the moments we have, that our conversations wouldn't be so much about us, but the ones we're with, that our life would be prioritized in a way that reflects a selflessness that's built out of compassion, founded in a love that's eternal. Bless Diane. Bless. Bless our dear friend. Give her strength. Cover her heart.
we vow before you, Lord, to be there for her. We thank you for this time and for the celebration of life and for Steve Cameron. And everyone said, Amen. Well,